But before we get into the video, I have created a Discord. I'm going to put the link in the description, but please come in there and you can start talking to me and other people. I'm just trying to make a little bit of a community. You know, nothing major, but you know, it's nice to get to know other people who are in the same boat as you, trying to get better at the game and improve. So exploit number 1 versus the reg in the IPPFR bet check bet line. We're going to be picking bet 70 as our preferred sizing with thinner value bets, and we're going to core our entire value range versus any raise of 125% or below, and I'll illustrate this perfectly in the hand example. So this is a real hand that I played. I've hidden the names, but our villain, this is me in 3 big blinds on the button in anti-game, and villain 7 is a regular 21, 19, 11. This is NL 500. They call, we get king 3 deuce, we go for a small c-bet, generally just range villain. They check call, deuce turn, check, check. We're not value betting this. River is an 8, and they go for a check. So immediately we should be able to process 2 things quite quickly. One, any king is supposed to value bet. The only exception would be the occasional time you'd want to mix a king in as a check. Therefore, tens dominates most of their range in this line. Therefore, we have a value bet. Now pick 66% or 70% or whatever. Why do I pick this? When they use this check raise, we're going to be bluff catching at 100% frequency, and I will talk about why. Okay, so as we go through the sim, means you bet 25%. Now we simplify it to a range bet. We're not really going to be talking about that. And turn, I let the AI pick a size, say 100%. It's probably similar to the size I would have picked in game. I'd mainly build around like obviously a deuce and, you know, boats and, you know, good king x, etc. And it's like kind of how the solver would also build when you use this size. And then yeah, obviously you see tens is checking. Quite important to realize also the check call range here. They will obviously contain like ace highs, king highs, even some queen highs supposed to check, or pocket pairs. You know, we've got like ace 4, ace 5 off, these kind of hands. And some of these low back doors. Shout out to my low back doors video, which should hopefully pop up on screen here. But yeah, one of the things I think is quite key is like if we look at the deuce X down here, 5 deuce, 4 deuce, from experience, population. Now, if you're playing on the mid-stakes, players, a lot more capable players will typically raise a lot more with these type of hands on the flop, and maybe less with like the second pair type hands. But this king 3 deuce is a little bit different from like king 7 deuce, where 7x might not raise as much as it should in theory, where this one I think maybe people would still raise 3 and deuces quite often. That's actually quite important as we go into the river, knowing that the turn is a 2. What I did is I gave the solver 3 sizes to split, like a overbet size, 75% size, 30% sizing. You can see how king x kind of reacts here. Is obviously the best king x will like value bet for like this overbet sizing. Obviously deuce x now, they're supposed to be like mixing. There's some thin value bets with like these like pocket bets. And the reason I split the size like this is because population likes to split river sizes a lot, and they're usually unbalanced in certain ways, but we're not really focused on that. We're just focused on like how much king x is like checking and stuff. But if I was to click on this compare nodes illustration here, we can even go into drawing mode. Now I want this to be with this one. This node here has one size, and this is 100%. And I want you to look at the king x here. Is apart from king deuce, if we look down here, all of the king x, there's like a little bit of king 8 that I mouse over. There's like almost 100%. It's like 99.5% like betting king X on the river. This is for one side in the scheme. What that should illustrate to you is if, depending on whether you want to split your river sizes or not, which most people split their river sizes, is what it should illustrate is that king X here is a value bet almost always. Now some players like to check king X a little bit, but even in the line nodes here where they do have some checks with king X, we will come into the button node. The pocket tens is always going to generate EVU value betting, and it's because you're supposed to be called sometimes by ace high, and like a lot of the range here is ace high. Now this is when we've actually eliminated like most of the pocket pairs from the range, which don't go for value in this line. But if we were to put the pocket pairs in the checking range more, tens would be value betting even more, or generate more EV, basically. And like there's a lot of like traps in this. What does this mean? This long ass explanation I've been blabbering on about. What does it all mean? Well, I'm going to go using a tool called SnapMDA. I say a tool, it's a website. I just want to say SnapMDA. If you do like SnapMDA, I'm going to put a link in the description with a referral code because it is a subscription based. So we're on to SnapMDA, and I'm going to show you guys how it exactly works. What we're going to be looking for is the line from the out of positions point of view. So it has these buttons, the websites that it uses mass data from, fish, reg, we want reg, limb, single raise pot, 3-bet, 4-bet, out of position, in position. So we want it from his perspective. Preflop caller, preflop raiser. We selected preflop caller. Another line from his perspective. It is check call, check raise, and then you have this like it gives you like a bunch of like options. You can be specific to formations. I don't want to be. I just want to generally show you the line. And then it's going to give you this result. And just to explain it, we're going to look at some things overall. So this is comparing to GTO. Overall frequency, this line occurs roughly 9% of the time. Roughly when it occurs, you will have about 45% bluffs, as you can see here. We can even click and get a range comp. I mean, it shows you a bunch of stuff basically, but like what you find here is a population will obviously turn up with like a lot of value hands. Is very specific to the board, but they won't have like bluffs, and a lot of the time it's considering bluffs to be like in this middle pair and worse region. Better in this specific spot, pocket tens is basically a middle pair that beats all of it. That's how many bluffs there are, and this is something called the call EV. This tells you how much better this is to call than GTO. And these are the kind of more important things. There's the little things like what actions occur, the average size in, the pots, average pot size. But these are the important things that were compared with GTO. This doesn't happen very often, 9% of the time. When it does happen, they bluff a lot, and you make a lot of money calling bluff catchers. But if we compare it to GTO data, this is in GTO, it should happen about 15% of the time on average. They should bluff about 32% on average. And when you call EVs as -2, basically what that means is like bluff catchers are losing money unless you have good blockers, essentially. Minus 2 EVs. So like obviously if you have a good blocker to a value bet, or like an unblocker to a bluff, he's more likely bluffing, so like your bluff catcher will like make a bit more EV. So like you should be kind of indifferent. There's a graph down here that's kind of hard to explain. Call EV compared to the size of the pot and the river bet size, but we're going to be looking at like 75% here. It should be about 2 percentage of the pot. We're not going to worry too much about the flop c-bet sizing right now. This is just the river bet size that you've picked, 75%. This is a call EV. Now if we go back here, we're going to take this 75% and you look how much massive amount of call EV the bluff catching makes. Now it goes massively down towards 0 when you start to use 100%. It doesn't really cover overbets in this line. But like, the important thing to note is it's a very attractive spot to bluff catch, despite the fact that the frequency of it occurring is is happening almost half as much. I'm hoping that's explaining what the data is showing. But let's go back to the sim. So if we return to the sim, I've put in roughly the raise size of him. Now, here you actually see tens, just bet folds. It's actually minus EV bluff catcher. This is assuming the bluffing frequency here if we raise. Now, if you count anything that's third pair and ace high and below, and you count it up to a percentage, that is essentially his bluffing range. We could even do that if you wanted to. We got our trusty little calculator here. We'll take this, we'll highlight the box. Third pair 12.7, ace high 13.8, no main hand 4.6. So 12.7 plus 13.8 plus 4.6, around about 31.1%, right? Now, what pot odds am I getting? If you come here, you'll see the pot odds about 33.7%, right? It's just funny. That's like that's 2%. That's awfully similar to the GTO frequency, isn't it? Funny that it's like 2% call EV. That's what you get offered. But now we go back to the data. Actually, let's go back to the hand first. So now in the hand, just go back here. We're getting offered about 31%. So the size is a bit smaller than what we put in the sim. Okay, let's go back to the data on SnapMDA. You see 44.9% bluffs. And the great thing about this is you can even get things like the formation as extra. So let's just start with the formation. BB versus button, even more bluffs, which is to be expected. Even better spot to call. Let's just go to the texture now. Let's put in it. You can put in the texture. So it was, let's just put in king. We don't have to get the suits right. It was like king 3 deuce draw. So this tells you like the bluffing frequencies generally pretty solid. The only king highs, single Broadway, lots of bluffs still. The only when the pair turn comes in is a pattern of like being less bluff raises, but it's still enough. This is still like quite a small sample compared to the overall sample 300k hands. This is only, this is like 5% of boards. So generally overall it doesn't affect anything and it's still overbluffed. So that should tell you quite a lot about how the spot. So yeah, we go into this and we call and villain turn up with ace 5 off. I just want to show you. So if you look at this actually in theory from his bluff raising range, you see ace 5 offsuit. There's actually some bluffing with like some of the combos. It's not really bluff raising that much, but it generally likes to do it with a club. Now he did it with a combo that the solver wouldn't necessarily have picked, or if it did pick it, would have picked it 5% of the time. But what does this kind of tell you about the spot? So this guy is still only doing it 5% of the time. He still has to have a lot of traps with like king deuce, like we're going to see here, ace deuce, king deuce, queen deuce, pocket eights, these kind of hands. So like maybe he does it a little bit too much with these kind of hands, or maybe too much with middle pairs, as we discussed. But like the amount of traps he has to have is a little bit more significant than what people would do in reality, and that's why this makes a great exploit. Instead of just bet folding our pocket tens here, it makes a great exploit to bet fold call. And I could waste your time and node lock this and like make his range have 44% plus, but you obviously know what the result. Okay, so let's move on to exploit number 2. This is also versus a reg, and this is in a single raise pot bet line. And this one is value hands that can go either way, lean towards belling on the turn on underbluff boards. So like ace high flops, free Broadway boards, mono boards, etc, etc. And when I say underbluffed, I'm talking about this specific line, which I might as well just add in, the check call check bet line. Let me show you an example. Just one, I think. So we have no real like sample on the villain at this point. It's 13 hands, it's not really converged. We have a cold call flat. This is from the cash game challenge, completely rakeless, no anti game. I think I showed this one on stream before, actually, but he calls smaller. Now the range is going to be a little different here than the big blind range, but you know, we decided to bet small. Actually, in theory, you'd want to mix this hand as a lot as a check, but you'd still want to sometimes bet it. This kind of board's not like always amazing, but it doesn't matter. We're just keeping it simple. He calls. We have a 10 turn, and now we have an option. This hand should mix in theory, assuming we're against the big blind for a second. I elect to bet, and I elect to always bet my hand. No, and he calls, and then we get to the river, and obviously it's a bad river. Ace-X of hearts, which is a big part of the targeting range for value. Has hit there, luckily hasn't led, so we have to face that particular problem, and we will check back. And I showed this hand before. For some reason he had King Jack offsuit, which is the purest of folds that you'll ever see in this spot. But you know, what would have happened if we had actually checked the turn? Well, on this specific river he probably would have bluffed. I'm not sure what size he would have picked, but would he have picked 18 big blinds? You tell me. But we're going to have a look again at the theory and the data. So we're doing this, so we're just imagining this as button versus big blind for a second. So mix and flop, you know, lots of mixes, blah blah blah, call. Here's King Jack with the diamond, obviously continuing. Some could even potentially raise. There are other raising candidates that might come a little bit better, like King 9 connects a little bit more, potentially around the backdoor straight. But like, I think the solver's picking its bluffs here from like the worst King High, King of Diamond combo. Sometimes it does that. Now turn, I gave, you could actually have different sizes here. I gave it similar size to what I used in game. You actually seen Ace Jack is actually like favoring check when I use the size, but if I picked 125, Ace Jack would mix. If you told me going through this node that he would call this King Jack combo, it would obviously prefer to bet. But the other thing we're going to talk about is this line here, and we're just going to put like a random river out. We're not going to put the river that came, just a random river. Now the solver's like picked a bunch of random sizes. Again, we talked about how people like to split ranges. I mean, I don't see people 1000% jamming. Maybe that will come in time. So let's just pick 150 and 66. So we just like split the range like in this way. So like Ace-X picking like the 66 kind of percent sizing on the back. Some of the stronger ones using big, and then like some overbets with some of the value hands. You see 4-3 for example, 2 pair, 10-8, these kind of hands, 10-4. Yeah, so we have this split on the river. Let's just use the most common size, 66%. How often is this going to be? Now let's go into SnapMDA and we find a spot, which I might skip to selling up, but actually I'm not going to skip so we can get used to doing this. SRPO, PPFC, same thing, but this time it's going to be check, call, check. And I'm interested in the check, call, check bet line. We're not going to just go overall. And we're going to look at it. We're going to run it. And we're going to look at it from GTO perspective. Frequency happens maybe half the time. A call EV obviously for bluff catcher should be very close. Why? When it says call EV, by the way, this is just for like hands that like just bluff catch, not hands that you know actually be value. Ace Jack wouldn't be in this category of like hand. Ace Jack would definitely be value in this line. I take. It's quite interesting how the graph like slides around, but that's not really what we're looking at. What we're going to do here is we're going to go and stick in the texture, and we're going to stick in ace high board. So this was like ace 8. Suits don't necessarily matter. Ace 8 4, I believe it was, yeah, it was a 10 of hearts or something like that, or 10 of diamonds. I think I got the suits the wrong way around, but it's fine. It doesn't really matter. We're just looking at this. Specifically flop ace high is what I'm looking for. Now if we look here, this is one with the call EV is minus 10%, so bluff catchers do much, much worse. So subsequently, by that logic, a hand like ace jack here, which if we go back to turn is like pure check-in. Now it has reasons, probably is some of it's going to be to do with blockers, like, you know, he's supposed to like fold ace x quite a lot, and his continuing range is more built around like 10x of diamonds, strong flush draws, ace x, like 2-pair, you know, these kind of hands. A good ace like ace 9, which is why the threshold starts to like drop around ace 9 from which pure calls to like ace 7, because like our threshold is ace jack, basically ace jack of hearts. If we go back here, if they're not bluffing as much and we're just in this line, then what would happen if I node locked the whole tree is ace jack would much prefer favouring towards the betting line, and if they're calling king jack offsuit, it's gonna like absolutely print because that guy's burning money. I don't know why he called king jack offsuit. I think he might be a recreational, coming to think of it. But yeah, when we face these like underbluffed boards like ace high, we want to favour towards the betting node, because like when we go into the checking node, a hand like ace jack isn't really quite, which is more like protecting range, isn't really benefiting massively. Okay, so this is the final exploit that I'm going to discuss. This is exploit number 3 versus a fish. This is the single raise pot in position BFR, and this is the flop decision. This is actually one of the most well-known and boring exploits. But essentially, instead of going for a range bet, we're going to be looking at our trashy hands with no equity, and they can do very well in a delay c-bet line. And I think it's personally especially good on ace high boards. And let me explain in the same method as before with an example. So here we have 9-7 offsuit. Villain 10 is so we open really wide. See there's like a reg that looks quite tight as well in the blinds, which is very nice for us because that means he's not going to punish us for this. There are better players, like if this guy was in the blind, for example, you can barely see the stats here, 27, 23, 16. This guy is probably going to punish you a lot more for this play. But yeah, it's good. So ace 10 free. Now some people would play a polarized strategy, some people play a small c-bet with range. Now I play a lot of range bets generally in these kind of boards, even in button versus big blind, against regs, even though like solver would quite often favour an overbet flop strategy, but versus a fish I prefer the overbet flop strategy, and I prefer to delay c-bet like this, because once they check we get just a really good like bluffing spot. So what I did here was even though it's a fish spot, is I widen my range rough to what I might open versus this guy, and this is maybe something like a player this loose would probably flat, like really a lot of hands. And obviously he is very wide range, we have a very wide range, but we're still like c-betting super often for small size. And when they told the AI to pick a size, obviously a fish is not going to defend like this. But like if we were to look at 9-7 offsuit, it would definitely be a hand that would favour a c-bet with the backdoor flush. But okay, if we went into a delay c-bet line, which is picking 40%, our hand would also favour going into that line. So we have two options basically: delay c-bet or c-bet small range. And you're probably familiar with this by now, but now we're going to change this to fish, and we're going to take away reg, single raise pot out, position Preflop corner, we know. And we're actually going to go into, we're going to look at like check fold, just check fold. We're going to ignore the texture, and we're going to run versus a fish. And now we're going to do this thing where we compare like bluff EV versus, and the frequency it happens. We're going to look, this is GTO data, 43% of the time you should be check folding on average versus a complete air should capture 17.2% of the pot, versus a fish it goes down, so like 5% down, so it's like worse, 5% frequency becomes worse, but that isn't so bad if we can get them into the check call check fold line, because like if you see here there's actually good bluff EV in this spot with huge overbets, but like is that really what we want to do with a trashy hand that has no equity? Like if we go into like a smaller size and we're not making a huge amount of money. And then there's also the check call check fold line. Now this line is actually pretty good. It occurs very often, so this is a good spot to bluff, so you can actually go into this line. According to theory, the average fish is going to like bluff quite a lot. In this line, it's going to happen around about half the time. You go check call check bet, they're going to bluff quite a lot. Not great if you have a hand like 9-7 offsuit and you've bet the flop, because then you just don't get to win the pot that much, because like raisin versus the raisin's also not going to be great, because if we look here against bet fold, again raisin pure air hand on the river. In GTO you can get a little bit of money with bluffs if you pick the right hands to raise. Against fish you don't really make money. Let me look at how much, look at how much money you lose if you bluff fish. If they bet fish, bet pot, and you bluff, look at how much the money you're burning. This is why I never have bluff ranges. You do generally pretty well if they bet really small, but like once they start betting like over 2/3 pot, it just sort of becomes really bad and just a money burn basically. Yeah, so you just kind of have to know your customer basically. So like we've looked at all the options of like going down the check call check line. Like if we can get to the river, check call check bet, that can be a nice bluffing spot with trash. But there's an even better one, which is like if we go check check fold, and this one is definitely like the best one against fish. It occurs pretty often and we'll win like 24% of the pot. So like generally as a line it occurs in theory, it occurs more than in theory, and they'll fold more. But the best thing about this line is if they just check call the turn, you also get into this spot. Oh, so if that occurs again, you also get into the spot, the check call check fold line, and this line here, this is what it should look like in theory. Like you make a little bit of bluff EV, but like against fish, you make a lot of money bluffing, especially if you any size from like over 50%. Just generally going to make quite a lot of money bluffing on average. Yeah. So like, it just becomes really, really good spot for trash to play. Whereas like, if you go into like these check call, if you go into like the check call, check fold line with your trash, you just don't do as well. Like, you make more money in theory than against fishing routers. So in reality, the pot's also like smaller, which I think is quite interesting. But yeah, you do a little better fish check. I mean, so what I would say looking at this is how would I change my strategy with like value hands as well. You can look at this data and be like, well, with trash, I really want to go into check and then bet as a bluff, which is what you see here. I go check bet, and I'm gonna fire the river here. and I get the fold. I do this as a bluff, but like imagine that I had, I don't know, ace 10, 9, or just like ace king. You know, it's just really good to just go bet the flop and then bet the turn. If you bet the flop small, you could bet the turn still and like get called by ace x. And if you had specifically ace 10 and you bet the flop small and then you got the turn, you just like go for it like another good sized bet. And if they call, just shove the river and you're just going to be making more money with your value. I think this is a good illustration of why using data to build strategies can be like generally really good for most players as they come up through the stakes. I would say data is not everything, because once you reach a certain level, players are a lot smarter, they're a lot more studied, they understand a lot better what's going on, and they can adapt and also punish you in spots that you are not aware of. But that being said, if I'm playing just 100 now in a reasonably sized pool, I'm going to want some data and I'm going to want some good strategies and I want to execute them. And I want to show you. Please join my Discord. Yeah. And to end the video, everybody, just look at this beautiful panda. Isn't he cute? I'll catch you guys next time. Links are in the description for SnapMDA. Shout out to the creator. And also for my Discord.